Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on all of the newly announced Star Trek projects that are in the works. My thoughts on them all collectively as they pertain to the future of Star Trek. Most notably, beginning with the renewal of Star Trek Discovery. We know that it has been renewed for some time now, a few weeks now, for a third season. And I gotta admit to being largely trepidatious about where they're going with it. For all intents and purposes, the finale left off with the Discovery and a chunk of its crew being propelled to the far-flung future, 950 years into the future of the Star Trek universe, that kind of thing. And just sort of on a surface level, I feel very trepidatious about that because it sounds to me like a kind of Lost in Space, Star Trek Voyager on steroids kind of plot aesthetic. And I don't know how well or not that sits with me. Of course, much akin to Kirk chiding Scotty in, I think it's Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, tut tut, young minds, fresh ideas, be tolerant. I am tolerant of young minds and fresh ideas. I've always sort of taken to that whole idea of the IDIC, the infinite diversity and infinite combinations aspect of one's mentality, and applied it to Star Trek as an entertainment medium, where I'm always open-minded to all different kinds of Star Trek, all different iterations, from the original series to the Next Generation, to Deep Space Nine, to Voyager, to Enterprise, to all of the various films, both the original cast films and the TNG cast films, to the J.J. Abrams films, and even to Star Trek Discovery, the animated series, all that kind of stuff. I have been open to all of them, and I have largely embraced all of them. I would say that some of them, there are aspects that excel and are resounding and are just the cream of the crop. And then there are some failings, shortcomings in each of the iterations of those aforementioned Star Treks. I believe, for my own personal tastes, Discovery comes the closest to being almost 50-50, where I've been flopping very much back and forth between things that I really like and exalt and things that disappoint me and I must be critical of. And it's those criticisms that I have that largely speak to my being so trepidatious, because you don't only have the updating of the visual continuity, which I have largely embraced. I really love what they did with, the Enterprise bridge and all that kind of stuff, the redesign of the ship, updating it for the 21st century, all that kind of good stuff. And I very much am on record vocally, as well as in print over on my Facebook account, saying I very much champion a Pike Spock #1 Discovery era Enterprise second 5-year mission series. I'm wearing the gold, much as I did my Discovery finale video, for the purposes of saying this is how much I want it. This is how much I support that idea. And I believe I am in the majority of Star Trek fandom with that sentiment. But so the thing of it is, though, is back in the day when Voyager was still newly airing, and Enterprise subsequent to that, Enterprise being my all-time second favorite Star Trek series after TOS, by the way, I do very much remember people on message boards and people in the fan community saying, Voyager, while it debuted with some level of fanfare, eventually it got tired. And there were a lot of people within the fan community saying, oh, this is a yawn fest. This has been there, done that. They're just recycling ideas, going back to the original series, going back to Next Generation. Enterprise, very similarly, was said to be cut from similar cloth, in that there were no, according to people, original ideas and whatever like that. And being that Enterprise is my second all-time favorite series, you can probably discern how I felt about it. I didn't really feel that way about it. And maybe the large majority of the reasoning for that is because I still haven't seen, even to this day, every episode of The Next Generation, every episode of Deep Space Nine, and every episode of Voyager. I've seen large chunks of all three of them, respectively, but the only series that I've seen every single episode of thus far is TOS, Enterprise, and now Discovery. And I've seen every single one of the films. So I do have under my belt a large collective of emotions and feelings and thoughts and memories to do with all of these different iterations and aspects of Star Trek. And I just feel like, in the grand scheme of things, as emotionally fulfilling as Discovery has been in its first 2 seasons, and for all of the things that I have been celebratory over and that they've gotten right, to my estimation, I still think all of the Star Treks previous were just held to a higher echelon of quality overall. As far as the story continuity goes, as far as the characterization and the drama of the storytelling goes, I feel like Star Treks of old were just smarter, for lack of a better term. And there was this great post by Doug Drexler over on his Facebook page recently, talking about the psychology of continuity. And I highly recommend you go and check out his post, read it at length, because I think it summarizes chiefly my repetitive criticisms with Discovery. Not so much to do, I feel like it's kind of a biting commentary on the divisiveness of the visual updates, the visual continuity of Discovery being so updated. But for me, I don't really apply it to that. I apply it more so to the creative minds that were behind the series, whether the production element, whether the direction element, whether the acting element. There was a lot more creative effort and thought put into Star Treks of old than has thus far been carried out in Discovery. And largely you can already see the proof in the pudding in the fact that the showrunners have changed like 4 times over, twice in the first series, twice in the second series. And we're going to have a whole new, stint of people producing it for season 3. So like there's already this disparagement of continuity as far as planning ahead and planning it out and all that kind of thing. And I think that is the most recurring criticism I've had watching both seasons of Discovery thus far. I just want it to be smarter. I want it to be a little more brilliant, a little more eloquent in its being conducted and it's being carried out. And I'm largely worried with the slew of all these different series that the people behind it aren't necessarily up to the task of holding a candle to what's come before. Not to say that it's an impossibility, but I just feel like, all of the problems that I do have, they're problems that don't go away. They keep recurring. Even if I vent them and discuss those frustrations at length in a, episode discussion video such as this, reviewing each of the episodes of Discovery, it still recurs. It still comes back around again. It still happens again and again. And I want something cleaner, more eloquent, smarter, more plotted out and planned ahead in whatever Star Trek efforts they bring forth for us in the future. So where we leave off in Discovery is, again, the ship has been propelled 950 years into the future. It seems very much like I can't wrap my mind around, because if we're to take the visual continuity of the technology within the Star Trek franchise, within that universe as a whole, I feel like we're talking about a universe wherein this intangibility should exist. Things are going to be much more psychic links and and stuff like that. The advancements of technology, you would presume, would be so far beyond anything we can comprehend. And I'm just not sure the people behind these series are that smart to think that outside of the box, based on what we've seen thus far. And then you have, the added announcement of a Section 31 show, which is going to be strictly revolving around Captain Philippa Georgiou, or at least the Mirror Empress Georgiou, Michelle Yeoh's character, who last we tentatively saw she was on board Discovery, and they all went to the future together. Now, granted, I believe I've heard that the Section 31 series is not something that will come about until after Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, so presumably that is to give us a hint and a whisper that at some point, if not the entire crew of the Discovery, Georgiou singularly herself must at some point come back in time. And that's even, if we're to presume that's when this Section 31 series is going to take place. For all we know, it'll take place alongside the Picard series in that era, post DS9 and all that kind of stuff. I really don't know. The last we saw anything hide nor hair of like Ash Tyler in Section 31, as far as the 23rd century were concerned, was his being promoted, elevated to the head, figurehead or not, of Section 31 with the mission statement of transparency, making it more known among, the worlds of the Federation and things like that, what their activities are and their mission statement is. Of course, it becomes much more enigmatic and clandestine in the future, as per the DS9 era and whatever like that. So there's a disparagement there. And just the overhanging WTF of, is Georgiou going to come back and head it in the 23rd century? Is she the sour element that turns it dark and enigmatic again? Is Ash Tyler even going to be involved? But if he is, do they continue to clash and things like that? There was an episode of season 2 of Discovery where they first find out that Leland is not up to snuff, that, you know, his reactions and his actions and his orders and things like that seem to be strange and odd. This was after he was overtaken by Control, though nobody actually knew it. But Georgiou was perceiving something and Ash Tyler was perceiving something, and the playful banter between the both of them, when they began to realize something was amiss and they worked together, I had said in my episode discussion of that particular episode, hey, if this is what the Section 31 series is going to be like, with this playful butting heads between them, all of the, you know, Spock and McCoy of the original series, or Janeway and Seven of Nine of Voyager, or Archer, Trip and T'Pol in Enterprise, if it's going to be written that way, then that's something I very much want to see. I wouldn't mind seeing a Section 31 series with Ash Tyler and Georgiou constantly being complementary to each other, because they're both coming from, you know, sort of the same mission statement, but then at the same time having different ways of carrying out orders and whatever like that, you know, applying that mission statement to scenarios where they butt heads. I would very much be down for that. But again, it's all a big WTF so far. We don't know what to expect. We don't know what it's going to be about, how it's going to happen, if it's going to happen, that kind of thing. They've announced it, but it's so far along. Who knows at this point what it's going to amount to. And similarly with Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Now, as I mentioned, we also have the Picard series, and we don't know anything about that other than some of the casting alongside Patrick Stewart. Apart from, you know, Stewart's own words that it's going to be a Picard unlike any you've seen before. And not to sort of hold to nostalgia, because it's not going to be the Star Trek you've seen before. It's not going to be that era of Star Trek you've seen before. Not that Star Trek Nemesis, the last aspect of that era, was necessarily conforming to that Star Trek we've seen before, arguably so. But that does have me trepidatious as well, especially the idea that the rumored title for the series, as someone tipped me off in the comments of one of my videos, is Star Trek Destiny, which by and large just makes me call back to the novel trilogy Star Trek Destiny as written by David Mack, which is like just another example of what maybe they should have done in producing a Star Trek series, if not a full-length, you know, streaming series as Discovery is, perhaps a mini-series, because the Destiny trilogy would have brought back familiar faces from all aspects, all eras of the Star Trek franchise, from TOS to TNG to Enterprise, all that good stuff, dealing with the origins of the Borg and a brand new species that we've never encountered before, and there's a lot of, to borrow from Doctor Who, timey-wiminess, and it's a brilliant trilogy, and they could have very much done that with the money they spent on Discovery, and it would have had everyone who is a Trekkie or Trekker chomping at the bit, I think. Or even the Star Trek Vanguard novel series, also co-written by David Mack, but also Dayton Ward, Kevin Dillmore, and Marco Palmieri. The entire Vanguard saga was revolving around a space station called Starbase 47, also known as the Vanguard, and it was right on frontier space in a largely, you know, sort of neutral zone-esque unexplored segment of space, in between the Klingon and Tholian borders, and there was a lot to do with these super-powered, supernatural-seeming beings, and again, the Tholians and the Klingons, and there was spy stuff going on, and it was just epic and grand in scope, and it was all within, coinciding to the timeline of the first 3 seasons of Star Trek, the original series. So whether they had done it as a visual reboot, a la Star Trek Discovery, or even taken a route more akin to Star Trek Continues, the fan series, where they recreated the sets and the vibe and the feel, the look, the vibe, and the feel of the original series. With all of that money, they could have done some brilliant, insane, incredible work and brought that to our screens, and our eyeballs would have melted from just the eyegasms. But also the story, the pacing and the plotting, the characterization, and all the depth of character that I feel is just more times than I care for somewhat lacking from Discovery. And I'm fearful is going to be similarly lacking in all of these proposed Star Trek series, including Picard. I don't know what to expect. Now, subsequent to these, we've also had announced 2 animated series. One of them is going to be this animated series called Lower Decks, which I believe is supposed to be more so like a comedic series, a spoof series, maybe something along the lines of like a Family Guy, where there are cutaways and references. I don't think necessarily pop culture related, but it's going to be knowing humor to anyone who is a Star Trek fan is the gist that I get of it. And I don't really know what to expect. I'm not entirely thrilled with that synopsis. The other one just came out in the last couple of days as of the time of this recording, is this new Nickelodeon-based show, which is going to be CG animated. I don't believe it has a title as yet, but it is said to be being created or written by Kevin and Dan Hageman, who are mostly known for the Lego movies and Ninjago and Hotel Transylvania. I've only seen the first Lego movie. I did enjoy it. I wasn't really thrilled with any of the other Lego related movies, Batman, or haven't even seen Ninjago, don't really have any interest in Ninjago or the second Lego movie. And while I do want to see Hotel Transylvania, I'm not really chomping at the bit, so I don't know. I can't really speak to the quality of writing that goes along with this pair. But the synopsis of this other, animated series again adds to the trepidation, and it's because it's supposedly dealing with a group of rebels, if you will, but they use the term lawless youths who stumble across a derelict Starfleet vessel that they steal, for all intents and purposes, and go on adventures with. And again, it brings me back to, like, one of my chief complaints about the finale of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, and a lot of elements seen throughout the series between its first two seasons, is the trying to make Star Trek cool for cool's sake. Trying to make it more Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or the like than Star Trek, than Star Trek's before. And not that I am in any way a gatekeeper, as I said at the top of this video. I've always been open-minded and applied myself with that idic sensibility of being open to all these different iterations and things like that. Even levels of quality and content and characterization. But this sounds very much like it's a Star Wars show, like Star Wars Rebels. Or Star Wars Resistance, the most recent Star Wars animated series. It sounds like, once again, we are trying to make Star Trek something it isn't. We're trying to make it Star Wars, to make it cool and approachable. And I'm just concerned where I'm not necessarily objecting to that on whole, like, end all be all, like, I won't be willing to swallow and palate that. It does give me reservations, because why is Star Trek trying to be Star Wars? How does it make sense, depending on the era within which this takes place? I mean, they already had the fan series Star Trek Renegades, which is supposed to take place post-Voyager. I've only seen the first episode of that, and I was somewhat mildly, impressed with it. So they've already kind of been there, done that in fandom circles. But is that what this show is going to be? We're going to have a bunch of rebels, renegades, who steal a Starfleet ship, and if the Federation is still around, if Starfleet is still around, this is going to be problematic. And are they going to be dogging Starfleet officers and things like that? And I don't know. It seems like a far cry to me in its synopsis from the once proposed Starfleet Cadet series that they wanted to bring about. Which probably is something I'd be much more chomping at the bit to see at this point in CG animated format as this is described to be. Why can't we have a Starfleet Cadet series where, you have like one adult who's the overseer, but for all intents and purposes, you're sending this young, fresh crew on missions, and maybe they get lost in space. Maybe they're going to a sector of space that has not before been cataloged or something like that, and they're cut off from Starfleet proper, and they have the same kind of adventures that presumably this crew of lawless kids are going to have, Again, it feels like Star Wars Rebels, not Star Trek, And I just have, that's the constant criticism I have. If you look at the finale of Star Trek Discovery, we have these like service droids, a la R2-D2 and the Phantom Menace, all these R2 units that come out on board Queen Amidala's transport ship to repair the damage, and that's what we have on the Enterprise all of a sudden. the NCC 1701 original series, visual reboot, updated, whatever like that, Starship Enterprise, and it has little R2 units, DOT-7s. And it's like, this isn't Star Wars though. I'm not completely objective to the idea of little service droids akin to this being in Star Trek, but when it is so blatantly twisting what the prism of Star Trek is and what it equates to in my mind to something more conforming and befitting of Star Wars, you know, you can have both. They can be two separate entities. They don't have to be alike to be appreciated and enjoyed. And I very much love both. I love both franchises. I don't find anything conflictual between them for my own personal subjective tastes. Similarly with Doctor Who. I love the big three, Doctor Who, Star Wars, Star Trek. They are my go-tos for sci-fi, fantasy-esque entertainment. Time travel, space travel, new worlds, all that kind of stuff. Not to disparage any of the other sort of carbon copy and similar aesthetic stylized shows like BSG and Babylon 5 and Stargate and all that kind of stuff. I like elements of all of those things that I have seen, but those are the big three that I go back to. And I just feel like somebody's taken these two big properties, Star Wars and Star Trek, and they're putting them in a blender, and they're like, well, let's try to make a milkshake out of them. And you know, I don't know. Just for my tastes, for my own personal, one man's opinion, subjective tastes, I'm largely fearful and I'm largely trepidatious about all of these various announcements for the lack of smarts, the lack of eloquence, the lack of continuity in the characterization and the level of storytelling. I'm just really afraid. I am all for, and I'm very much open-minded to, all sorts of brand new Star Trek ventures in entertainment form in that capacity, whether it be comics, whether it be cartoons, whether it be movies, whether it be TV or streaming series. But I just wanted to answer to a higher expectation, and I think that is probably what has always been since Discovery came about. The undercurrent complaint for most fans is that we just want something we recognize at a par excellence level that we expect from it. And so, you know, it'll remain to be seen. Only time will tell whether these worries and concerns are warranted. But I felt it would be remiss if I did not at least voice my concerns, especially after the less than satisfying Star Trek Discovery Season 2 finale, which, again, had me wishing and hoping for a whole different show. A Pike, Spock, Gold Tunic era, second 5-year mission in the 23rd century, pre-Kirk. And it is what it is. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you think of any of these Star Trek series that have been newly announced. Discovery Season 3, the Section 31 series, the Picard series, the Lower Decks animated series, or this new Nickelodeon animated series. You know, whether or not you agree with me or you agree to disagree, whatever your thoughts are, anything goes in the comments below, as long as you are respectable and sharing your own opinion and are respectful of others if they happen to disagree. And if you enjoyed this video, please have a look at my PayPal support link posted both in the description as well as the comments below, which affords you opportunities very much akin to Patreon, where you can set up a monthly recurring contribution, a one-time only kind of thing. You can send me a personal message alongside any contribution you send my way, requesting topics I may discuss in the future, ask for shout-outs, or make recommendations of things I may check out and would then inevitably shout you out down the line if I happen to discuss. And anything you saw fit to send my way would be 2 thumbs up for me in securing my longevity on YouTube for the foreseeable future. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Live long and prosper.